This is The Roadmap with Ted Jenkin.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Roadmap exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm your host, Ted Jenkin, and every single week we bring you some of the brightest and best CEOs and entrepreneurs and business owners, and we often talk to them about how to climb the ladder, how to scale their business, and one day exit stage left. But as of late, a lot of people have asked me, what about a nonprofit? I want to start a nonprofit, a 501c3. How do I do this today? So I have on a good friend of mine and a guest, and he's done amazing things. He's now the CEO of Hillels of Georgia's. I call him Rabbi Larry. He's become a personal friend and a mentor. I thank you for coming on the program today.
Ted, it's awesome to be here. I'm so excited.
So this is it. You describe yourself as an entrepreneurial rabbi. I have never heard that. I remember being brought up in a Jewish neighborhood, and I never heard of an entrepreneur. What is that? What's an entrepreneurial rabbi?
Well, look, I would say that lots of people take journeys during the course of their careers.
Yeah.
And nobody really ends up where they thought they would be.
That's true.
And the journey is never linear. So I grew up in that similar Jewish neighborhood.
Yeah.
My father's an attorney, and I thought that forever I was going to go into law.
Right.
And then I graduated college and did some internships, but ended up teaching law and citizenship to kids in Philadelphia. And I fell in love with it. I got an education degree and taught elementary school for about 6 years before 9/11 happened. And it was 9/11 that changed my life forever. And I'm looking and I'm watching that footage that morning, and I said, there's got to be a bigger way to make impact. And that was the question that's always...
That's what got you into the rabbi business.
That's what got me into the rabbi business. I love teaching. The impact was real.
Yeah.
And you could see kids looking at you and knowing that even kids who struggled knew that you cared about them. And we all have those teachers who did that for us over the time that we were young and impressionable in those elementary years or even in the middle and high school years. But there's always somebody that comes around to make that difference. And I felt that when I was teaching.
Right.
But 9/11 just changed the way I view the world. And I said, hold on, there's got to be a bigger impact. And that year was the year I went out and became a rabbinic student and lived in Jerusalem for that year.
Wow.
And it was a really tense time. It was the middle of the Second Intifada. There was fighting going on and suicide bombings in Israel. And I was actually a block away from one of them while I was studying in Jerusalem.
Wow.
But it allowed me to understand not only which I understood already, which is the fragility of life. Is that life is so fragile.
It is.
And we never really realize it until something happens.
So let's just talk about this, because you're going to be taking over a fairly large nonprofit here in Georgia, being the CEO of Hillels of Georgia. How do you approach, first of all, 501c3? Because I love this first thing you said about passion, because every business owner has to have that to be successful. But in a nonprofit, how do you approach this in thinking about how you grow the business and how you scale the business? Because nonprofits kind of are, I know they're not a business per se, but they kind of are a business.
They are a business. And if you're running a nonprofit organization and you don't look at it as a business, you're not going to be able to do what needs to get done. Because a lot of times that if your donor base, if the philanthropist, if those who are supporting your cause don't take it seriously, because you're not taking it seriously, you're not going to be able to support the organization. And that's where the business aspect comes in. You can never, though, however, when you're in a nonprofit, lose your essence of why you're there. Because mission, you have to be laser focused on what your mission is. And too many people lose focus because we're out there and we're altruistic and we want to make a difference in the world, but you got to look at what are you selling? What's your product? And especially in nonprofits, that can be a little blurry.
I think that's why a lot of business owners fail and die, because they think about a business just to make money and not about the passion. So you do need that both on for-profit and non-for-profit. And I'm just curious in here of how you market the nonprofit, right? Because some people may be naturally inclined to do something with the nonprofit, but how do you get the message out there so everyone knows what you do, why you're doing it, and why they should be contributing either financially or otherwise to the cause?
You come on the roadmap with Ted Jenkin, and that's how you get it done.
That's what they all say. They say, come on the roadmap with me, and your business gets out there, no problem.
That's it. Well, there is actually a grain of truth in that, because nonprofits as well as business is all about the relationships that you build.
Right.
It's every person that you meet, and you never know how they're going to come back into it again. and being able to help and support your cause or whatever your vision happens to be. And it's all about the one-on-one relationships and knowing what you're selling and being able to be there present, being your authentic self. And so many business owners fail to be authentic because that's what sells.
Right.
Your authenticity, you're being real, and what you have to offer somebody, how is that going to impact somebody else?
And nothing changes in the P&L. You still have to run I know you don't want to lose money, but there's still a profit and loss that you have to run, and looking at the revenues that are coming in. You still have overhead, you have employees, you may have rent and things like that. So you still have to kind of run it like a business, don't you?
Of course. A lot of times businesses will fail because they actually they're not laser focused on that vision and can't sell it. Amazing ideas are out there, but if you can't talk to somebody and say, here's why it's important,
Right.
and inspire somebody to want to invest, then it's not going to go anywhere. And that's where my next role, which is the CEO of Hillels of Georgia, has an intrinsic message that was, this year it's 100 years old in the United States. And initially supporting Jewish students on college campuses at the University of Illinois, which is where it began. And as you get out 100 years, the message and the vision is not only important, but it's even more specific in what do our young people need today. And when we're looking at the future of business and the future really of America in what we do, it's going to depend on college students coming out, having a passion to make a difference in the world. And that's where your focusing on the why is so incredibly important. Because if you know your why and you know that you want to create impact, that's where it all comes together.
I feel like in the nonprofit world, almost every decently sized nonprofit has a board of advisors or some sort of board. Yet in the private sector, a lot of small to medium-sized business owners may be questioning, do I need a board? Have you found, because you've obviously been in a lot of nonprofits, that having a board matters, and should a private business think about setting up their own board?
Well, the question is, why do you need a board? And for nonprofits, the IRS would say that you have to have a board.
As a requirement.
As a requirement, because they're responsible for the fiscal responsibility of the organization. How big that board is depends on your organization. And then beyond the fiscal management of the organization, what will that do? What will the board of directors do? Many times those board of directors can actually help to network for you. They're the ones who can sell the business as well. So you're not the only one that's raising money. You're not the only one that's selling the vision of the organization.
Right.
And that's incredibly important because a team of one may be able to get you that far, but you need the best of the best. So when you're looking at a board of directors, you want to diversify your board. You want to look at financial people. You want to look at HR people. You want to look at people who have connections in different agencies and businesses, government, nonprofit, and corporate in order to come in and help to support that vision. And there's so many people that are looking for meaning. And that's really where it comes in, is that we may be in business and we may be really successful, but some of the most successful business people don't feel fulfilled.
Right.
And the rationale is that their impact is not really
their families heard the story 1,000 times. They don't want to hear it anymore.
Right. And there's a great story about, there's a guy, who was a professional, and at his funeral, everybody's talking about what a great business guy he was and how he's out there all the time. And then his son gets up there and his son says, Dad, I wish I could tell you this. I'm so glad that you were there for so many people, but you weren't there for us. And the regret, once we're gone, we can't go back and we can't fix it. So what is the impact that we have, and how do we balance both our professional as well as our personal lives? And that's really important for CEOs, because you and I both have sat with CEOs and listened to them saying that, my hours are endless. I work all day and all night and I'm doing it. And how do you take care of yourself? Where's your family life?
Do you know, are you able to share with people, is it very expensive to set up a 501c3 if someone's thinking about, oh boy, I do care about a cause, whatever it may be? There's so many here in America. Is it expensive? Does it cost $5,000? Does it cost $20,000? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, it's a question on how you define expense. If you want to apply to be a nonprofit in the state of Georgia, it doesn't cost that much money. But eventually over time, it's going to cost you when it comes to employees, when it comes to your board, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to getting out there, and also in creating your vision. Because you may have a vision, but you may not know how to articulate it. You may not know how to manifest it in the actuality of the world. Because the roadmap is important, right? And that's why we're here, right? It's about the roadmap.
You said it again.
The roadmap is important.
Plugging my show in the show. I love that.
The roadmap is important, but the difference is with the roadmap, if you don't know your why, you're going to lose it.
Right.
And the roadmap may take you a fork that's going to take you to a dead end.
How, I mean, you're so inspirational, and I know that you can motivate people with the best of them, but we're in a labor market now where unemployment is at 3.4%. And a lot of people can find jobs. And often in nonprofits, you can't always compete on salary alone. How do you recruit and find employees that want to be in that organization, even though they could maybe earn more pay in the private sector?
The first is, and I'm glad you asked the question, because there are so many people that are moving jobs because they know that the market's open. They know that they can move to places because people are looking for good talent. There's a lot of people that are moving out of the corporate world into the nonprofit world.
Is that right?
Yeah. And the rationale is that you can make a lot of money in the corporate world, but then you're losing your sense of meaning and purpose in life.
Yeah.
And in a world that is so challenged, we're looking at such unrest globally. We're looking at unrest in our country. We're looking at unrest in people's families. The results of COVID and mental health on people is so serious and so real. So people want to know that they can provide impact, that they can make a difference. And we're seeing a lot of movement from the corporate world into the nonprofit world as a result. So while you cannot maybe compete financially with a big corporation, you can compete with quality of life. And that is a huge
You've
difference.
given all kinds of big speeches. I know that you got to do one here. I thought, and I could be wrong about this, but I thought it was for all the employees in Delta, that you were able to sit with the CEO and have a roundtable. How do you prepare for something like that? It's got to be nerve-wracking to be thinking, I could be talking to 100,000 people.
It all goes back to authenticity. If you are authentic in who you are, and the imposter syndrome is real, that when you get out there and you're sitting in a position like us, and other CEOs, that it's am I allowed to be here?
Right.
Did I earn my way? Do I belong at the table? And of course you do is always the answer.
Yeah.
Because the best CEOs are humble. They
That's
understand.
true.
They understand. They're grounded. Remember where they came from, and they understand what's important. But when we were sitting with Ed Bastian and Bernice King as well, and along with Bay Love, who with an amazing institute that's doing great work internally in companies to help understand each other. Authenticity is the best. I sat there and you tell your story, because it's the way to run a corporation. It's the way to run a nonprofit business. It's the way to live in the world, that we've lost ourselves in the midst of this economy, in the midst of the world in which we live. And when you can sit there and you can say, hey, you know what? I've been there. I feel you. I feel your pain. I feel your hurt. I feel your joy. That makes the difference.
How important do you think it is for a business owner? They built up a business. They could live in Alpharetta, or they could live in McDonough, wherever it may be, to actually give back into the community, because there are a lot of businesses that make a lot of profit and they may not give back. How important is it to be in the community and give back into the community?
There is a shift within the corporate world, but also nonprofits have always been there, to say, let's give back. Why? Because not only is it better for the bottom line, because if you feel connected, if your donors, if your investors know that you're connected to the community, they're going to know that you actually care. And that's a really big factor that we're losing in today's world, that caring about the community in which you live is a really important thing. And it says something about your character. It says, who am I as a person? And am I simply out to monopolize the system, to make money? Or am I out there to invest in the betterment of the community? And that ultimately, not just the Jewish community, but faith in general, is all about not only what's in it for me, but how can I give to others as well? Those corporations that are investing in the communities are doing better because other people see it and they want to support those companies that care about the communities they live in.
And I think that's all part of it, because people do forget that, even for profit, but I think kind of true for non-for-profit, that most of the money stays in your community, right? It enhances the value of the entire community, property values, the wellness of your children and your grandchildren that are going to be there. It's all part of why to give back, especially as our city, grows here in Atlanta. Are there any pitfalls of starting a nonprofit?
The pitfall is that you won't make it.
Right. But true of any business, right?
True of any business.
Yeah.
And that's going back to your initial question about being an entrepreneurial rabbi, is that you got to be afraid to fail.
Did you trademark that?
Huh?
We need to trademark that.
Right. I'm happy to do that. But you know what? Being afraid to fail or not being afraid to fail is the key on whether you're going to actually make it.
Right.
Because if you take risks, big risks, I've always been a big vision person. And I've always taken risks, which is what makes me an entrepreneurial rabbi, because the status quo isn't working anymore. That the businesses and the nonprofits that are making a difference show that they're different from others. And you know, you look at the Steve Jobs world, you know, which is one of those best examples of, I'm going to create something that you didn't even know you needed yet.
Right.
You know, and that's what makes corporations and nonprofits different. If you believe and you take the risk, even if you fail, you're going to learn something from it. So it's not being afraid to fail can get you to that next stage where you're actually going to hone and change and grow and adapt. And that actually is such an important characteristic of any nonprofit. You have to be able to adapt with the times. Because if you think, and you haven't listened to the population, if you think that your idea is what people want, but you haven't listened, majority of the time you're not going to make it.
It's very true. So you've obviously read a lot of books and you continue to study things all the time. Do you have one read for entrepreneurs out there?
Read and YouTube and whatever it is that I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek.
Yeah, he's great.
Who is fantastic. But his initial book, Start With Why, is fantastic. Because if you know your why, if you find your passion, everything else will fall into place. It's, you know, as kids, you know, we love Field of Dreams. You know, if you build it, they will come. And it's true in so many ways, because that your passion and your energy and your enthusiasm for what you care about is going to always come through. And people are going to want to invest, maybe in your business, but they're going to invest in you because they believe in you. And that's how you get an amazing board of directors. That's how you get an amazing staff, because they believe in you and your vision of where things are going to go. And it's actually interesting is that actually creates the roadmap. Because the roadmap isn't always clear until you get there and you realize, that's not working. Yep. Let me tweak, let me play, let me go in this other direction. And that's actually the power of adaptability and the power of moving in a place where you're listening, you're responding, and you're disrupting the market as a result.
Well, I love this. For people that are watching the program today, how can they learn more about supporting in one way, shape, or form for Hillels of Georgia?
Sure. hillelsofgeorgia.org is the website, looking at the statewide organization on making a difference in college students. And it's not just about their Jewish connections, but it's also about giving back. Because when you invest in students, you invest ultimately in community and in the future.
It's a great cause. I hope you all learned a lot about nonprofits today. You might as well ask yourself that question. Start with why. Maybe you need to do that this weekend. Think about why you're doing what you're doing and get a passion for what you're doing in the future. I'm Ted Jenkin, and this was this week's episode of The Roadmap. Thanks, Larry, for coming on today.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Ted Jenkin.